Gavin Bell is an award-winning entrepreneur and keynote speaker, recognised as one of the UK's most candid voices on what it really takes to build and exit a business. By the age of 30, he had founded, scaled and led Yatta through a successful acquisition. Now advising ambitious companies worldwide, he's known for his practical, engaging style and candid lessons on growth, systemization and building businesses that are truly exit ready. Warm welcome, Gavin.
Thanks for having me, Jenny.
I'm really pleased that we're finally getting a chance to talk, because I think I've seen you online, and I don't think we've just established that I don't think we've actually had a conversation. So I'm dying to get into these questions.
Yeah, me too. It's one of those things, isn't it, these days, where you feel like you can have a relationship with somebody, but you've never actually spoken, just through content.
It's very weird, and I'm sure you're going to go on to talk about that, aren't you? About personal branding, because you obviously have a very strong personal brand. But tell me, let's step back, because for the listeners, there's particularly now there's quite a lot of agency owners who are contemplating selling. So, having been through the journey, I'm sure you can share some insights that are going to be valuable. So, let's step back to when you were running Yatta. I mean, the original thought of starting Yatta, let's just go there, a short intro to what was the original gap in the market that made you start this agency?
Well, there's a couple of things. So although Yatta was 3 years old when I sold it, I've been in the marketing world for probably 8, 9, 10 years before that. And I started off as a freelancer, like a lot of people do. And one of the things that happened is I started off as freelance marketing, and one of my clients at the time asked me whether I could help them set up some Facebook ads. And I'd never done this before, and I said that to them, but we thought, let's give it a chance and see what we could do. So we launched long story short, we launched a campaign, and it did really well. Back in the days of Facebook ads, where you didn't have to be an expert, you could throw money at it, and it always tended to work. But what that told me was, or showed me, was that actually there's a real opportunity here for me to offer advertising services, because unlike the general marketing services that I was offering, is you can clearly see, is this creating a return on the investment? And I thought, if I'm helping clients make money, they will never leave me. And so I sort of saw a gap in the market there as a freelancer to go into that and try and become the go-to Facebook ads guy. That was sort of my mission. And I guess I did that. I built a personal brand, and I built a personal brand around being the go-to Facebook ads guy. And what I slowly started to see as I got into that world of advertising and tried to compete against some of the agencies was that a lot of the agencies that we were competing, or I was competing against at the time, were, I would describe them back then as sort of dinosaurs. And what I saw them doing was really old school ways of trying to go about winning business. So, tenders, pitches, and wining and dining clients. And that's just not me from a personal perspective. So I thought there has to be a way to go into this industry and compete with these guys in a way that isn't the old school, as I just explained. So my sort of methodology was, can I go into this industry, disrupt the industry by creating a leaner model whereby we focus solely on the results that we're getting clients, as opposed to things like the awards that we might win, or the things that get featured in some of the marketing media, like beautiful campaigns. For me and for Yatta, it was all about, can we add money to the bottom line of our clients?
And what kind of clients were you targeting? Were you niched at that point?
No, so I've never really niched. What happened was we actually started to generate niches almost organically. So one niche that I started to develop when I was still freelancing was stem cell therapy clinics in the US. Very niche. But the way that happened was, you sign one up, you get good results for them, and then they start to tell all of their friends in the different states that they're using this guy who's generating them all these leads. So organically we started to develop niches, and as we as we got into the years of Yatter as opposed to me, we were then able to almost niche or have certain members of staff that focused on a niche. But as a business, we always just sort of stayed broader.
But hold on, people are listening thinking, how the hell did he get a stem cell clinic in the US? Because I mean, you're UK based. Were you Scotland based when you started the agency?
Yep.
So how did you get that for the client? Just a quick sort of question.
Yeah, I think that was probably something like, in fact, it was through Upwork, I believe. So back when I was freelancing, an agency were looking for a freelancer to run the ads for their client. I got in that way, and then it sort of took off from there.
Interesting. So you started the agency, you started getting successful, you were focusing on a leaner model and ROI. Then what about this growth that you had? Were you just in the right place, right time? Or what do you think, looking back, was that key kind of growth driver?
So I think it comes back again to how we tried to disrupt the model. So I mentioned how, I'm obviously generalizing here on how all agencies did it, but this was my perception back when we launched, was the whole tender, pitching, wining and dining process. And I thought there has to be a better way. So why don't we actually put our money where our mouth is and run our own ads? We're an advertising agency. Surely we should be able to generate our own clients through our own advertising. And so that's what we did. And pretty much all of the growth of Yatter came from the engine of our own advertising. So that would mean clients would come to us directly through our ads, but then also the organic sort of referrals that come off of the clients that you got from them. So and advertising on the likes of Facebook and Google to get marketing clients is extremely challenging because everybody's doing it and therefore it's expensive. But I sort of had the mentality, if we can do this for long enough, that we will eventually get it to work. And it probably took us maybe 6 to 12 months to get our advertising sort of machine to work for us. But when it did, then that became the engine for all of our growth.
So were you also advertising on LinkedIn as well as Facebook and Google?
No, it was pretty much all Facebook. We did little bits of LinkedIn here and there. Whenever we tried Google, never really worked for us. So it was probably 90% Facebook and 10% LinkedIn.
Wow. Do you think that still works?
It's definitely getting more challenging. I think in the world of paid media, it's such a competitive market. There's so many people entering the market all of the time and running ads, and so that makes it harder for absolutely everybody. And what we found was one of the key challenges that we found was that you generate a lot of leads, but 99% of the leads are poor. And so you have to have a robust sales system in the business to work those leads and to find the diamonds in the rough. And I think that was probably another key contributing factor to the success of Yatter, was that we had a dedicated commercial director in the business that could work those leads. Whereas if you're an agency that maybe doesn't have that, or like I mentioned, you've got a maybe more old school commercial director, then you're not able to work those leads as hard and get the biggest bang for your buck.
So the majority of your leads were generated by advertising. You had a dedicated commercial director who was responsible for converting them, and that was the growth engine. Was there anything else that was contributing, or was that kind of like 90% of the success?
Yeah, that was 90%. I would say the other 10% would be when after say 12 months of running ads, we saw something interesting happen, which was whenever I would go into a room, and I can, it's 99% of the time this would happen, a networking room, somebody would come up to us and say, "Oh, I've seen your ads." And so there was a sort of halo effect that happened from the advertising, where someone wouldn't necessarily convert off the back of the ad, but would see you in person, have a conversation, and then potentially become a client that way. So that was really interesting.
And does this mean that you were front and center of that campaign? Like you were actually, it was about your personal brand more than the kind of company brand. How did that work?
Yeah, it was always through the company brand, and we tried to. So we worked a hybrid model where we were 4 days at home and then 1 day in the office. And that 1 day in the office, we always had dedicated time to filming, and we tried to get as many people on the team on film every time we were there. But what typically would happen is we would maybe use the guys that were on the tools running the ads to do some more educational pieces of content for organic. And then generally I and maybe one or two others were the sort of faces to the brand that would be the ones that were driving or creating the videos that were specifically for advertising. So I wouldn't say that it was my personal brand, but it was my face. I was probably the main actor, if you will, behind the advertising.
And were they kind of specific campaigns that were offering a certain package or, a promotion? Or was it just kind of get in touch, we can do this for you? Like just in a nutshell, that kind of proposition.
Yeah, so one of the things I realized was that I never wanted to try and convince somebody that they needed to run ads. And so our ideal customer was somebody that was already running ads, but they maybe weren't happy with their existing agency or weren't getting the results that they needed. And so we created an offer based on that. And the offer was a free audit. So what we would do is if you were running ads and not getting the results you were looking for, we would jump into your account, take a look, and give you some honest feedback on whether we thought we could help or not. Sometimes we couldn't, sometimes we could. And that was really the only offer that we ran, because we knew that if somebody clicked and converted on an ad that was offering a free audit, we knew they were running ads. And so it became more of a case of, do they have the budget to make it work? And is this a business that we actually think has legs that we could help? And then it was very straightforward from there. It's a case of, we think we can help you. Why don't we kick things off and test it out?
Great stuff. So then was the commercial director your first hire?
So our commercial director was a guy called Dave, and he first joined us as commission only. So he wasn't necessarily our first hire, but he was the first person, I would say, that was on the team.
Clever. And then at what point did you think, actually, this is not going to be a lifestyle business? I've moved from a freelancer. This is looking scalable. I'm actually going to kind of build it to exit. At what point did you start to think that could be something you'd go for?
Yeah, so actually it was during I had this, so pre-Yatter, the business was basically my personal brand, like I'd mentioned, and I'd started to get a few clients, but I had a realization sort of during COVID. I think everybody had a chance to take a step back and think about what they were doing with their life at that point. And for me, I sort of had this realization that I was building a business that I could never sell because it was purely my personal brand. And I made a decision at that point that I wanted to build a business that I could exit one day as opposed to a lifestyle business. So that was at that point, I thought, right, let's do things properly from the ground up and build a business that is sellable. So the step one for that was, well, let's create a brand name. Let's go out to a branding agency, get a brand name, a new website, full branding package, brand guidelines, all of that fun stuff. And that was how Yatter was created. It was sort of created with creating a sellable asset at the end of the day. And every decision that we then made from the creation of Yatter, the name, was with selling it in mind.
And at that point, had you identified anyone that was a potential buyer? Had you, through your network or anything, thought, actually, let's tailor it to this potential buyer? Or was it just, we need to put all of the groundwork in place and structure and, as you say, the brand guidelines, etc., so that
Yeah,
anyone.
I didn't have anybody in particular in mind, but I knew that the person that was likely to buy us would be another agency. And that agency would probably be looking to buy us for things like talent, our recurring revenue. So all of our clients were recurring revenue, and our processes. So they would most likely be looking to buy us up to then either merge us with an existing paid media department or for us to become their paid media department. And so we definitely designed the business with that in mind, but we didn't have a specific person that we were looking to sell to.
So talent, recurring revenue, and processes. So the commercial model for like pricing, when you did an initial audit for these clients, you converted the prospect into a client, and did you put them straight onto sort of a retainer?
Yeah, so all of that was another sort of decision early on, going back to the sort of disruptive question, was every single piece of work that we did was a monthly management fee. So all recurring revenue, no project work. And generally speaking, we were talking at roughly about $2,000 a month for an initial channel, which would be like running ads on Facebook, for example. And then a slightly smaller fee for any additional channels on top of that. So a client would come to us, or our lead would come to us, we would audit their account. If we found that there were things that we could do better, then we would essentially say, let's get you signed up. We had an initial 3-month period. And the reason for that was sometimes it can take up to 3 months to start to see results. And after that, it tended to be monthly rolling.
Okay, so that's going to be very attractive as a kind of recurring income for a potential buyer. So fast forward to when you were approached. Were you approached? How did that come about? Did you reach a point where you thought, right, now's the time? Had you sort of reversed engineered what revenue target you were looking for before you sold?
No, not really. So it wasn't really a financial decision for me. It was more a case of there was a few sort of timelines that were coming to head. So there was, having been in the marketing world for about 10 years, feeling like I was getting itchy feet to go and try and start and do something new. Business was doing really well. We'd grown year on year. And I feel like we'd maybe reached a point whereby if we were wanting to give the team and the business more opportunities faster, we could do that quicker as a larger entity. And then also personal reasons. I had my daughter was on the way, and I felt like becoming a dad and a sort of fresh start felt like a good time. So there wasn't a sort of specific moment, but a few things came to head where I thought, you know what, let's kick this off and let's get the business out there and see if there's anybody interested in buying us.
Looking back on that moment, do you ever have any regrets? Would you have held on for a little bit more, or do you think it was exactly the right point?
Yeah, zero regrets. I think looking at the decision, and it's not an easy decision, especially when you get to a point where somebody has made you an offer for the business and you have a decision to make on yes or no. It's not an easy decision. It's one that has effects on everybody, quite a lot of people actually. It's not just you, it's you, in my case, my wife, my daughter, everybody on the team, everyone down to accountants. It affects so many people. And so I thought long and hard about it. I swayed a lot on what we wanted to do, but eventually, obviously, went through with it, and delighted that I did it. Great decision, and I think it's worked in the favour for everybody. The team at Yatter, I think almost everybody has had some form of promotion, a lot more opportunities, and the business that bought us, Velstar, have been a great cultural fit for us.
Amazing. So talk me through the blow by blow steps of going through that, because I was talking to a friend of mine the other day who is looking at an exit, and he is agonizing over the fact that he's got to keep it to himself. So can you sort of walk me through roughly the timeline and what happens during that process?
Yeah, I mean, just on that point, that was probably the hardest thing for me, is keeping it to yourself, because as a team of 12, which we were, it's that size where you're still a close-knit team. And I just felt like I was lying all the time. I mean, I wasn't, because nothing had technically happened, but I felt like I was lying because you've got this big thing that's happening in the background, but you're trying to operate the business as if nothing's happening. So that's a real challenge. But in terms of blow-by-blow timelines, I think it was October. I get mixed up with the years now, but it was in the October time that I sort of decided we're going to get the business out there. And we contracted with Cactus, Spencer, who you know. And the purpose of working with them was they were able to take the business, help me create an interesting story about the business. Because when you're running a business, typically you only see the faults. All right, that's certainly, in my case, I only see the faults and the things that are wrong with it. But when you sit down with somebody and they are able to help pull out all of the good things, you actually go, cool, we've got a great business here. And it's not very often that you get to compare your business like for like with other businesses and see that actually the way that you've done things has been good, has been right. So we worked with them, and they essentially marketed the business to people on their list, people that they know that were interested in potentially buying businesses. And I think that process probably took three or so months. That resulted in quite a number of intro calls with agencies that were interested in us. And I think we had signed the letter of intent with one of them after 6 months. And then we went into the fun process of due diligence, which was probably one of the biggest eye-opening parts of the process for me, and just how long it takes and how thorough it is, and the amount of work. So that was a real challenge, was trying to run and operate the business, which is obviously a full-time job, and then trying to go through due diligence, which also felt like a full-time job at the time. And trying to balance those things was very challenging. But I think in the end, from signing the LOI to the deal being done, took roughly a year, something like that. And it came down right to the day before the first Rachel Reeves budget, which was tight, because at the time, some of the papers were saying corporation tax could be going up to 39%, and the business asset disposal relief might be getting scrapped. So you're thinking some of the 10% tax could be going up to 39%, and so we had to try and work the deal quickly to get things over the line before that, just in case that was happening, because that obviously changes a deal massively.
So 2 questions. When Spencer was looking at the business and saying, actually, Gavin, you're doing really well, these things are looking good, what were those things that you had got right, even though you yourself was pretty critical?
Yeah, I think it was, it's things like the 3 things I mentioned earlier. So the people element, we'd built an amazing team, and of really senior people that had all had agency experience. But I think obviously the recurring revenue, for me, that was just normal. But to hear that actually not every agency is built around recurring revenue was quite eye-opening to me. And then I think the key thing was our processes and systems. So I'm a total process system nerd, and everything in our business was process, systems, checklist, and finding out that not every business operates like that was again eye-opening. And that became one of the key things that we were able to then put out to the market to say, this is a business that isn't just doing well financially. It's doing well financially, but it's also pretty low risk for somebody to buy, because you've got the great people, you've got the clients, but you've also got the systems, which means you can sort of copy and paste this business into your own.
Talk me through just briefly those systems. What project management system were you using? You know, what were those SOPs look like? You know, just what were the key elements of those processes?
Yeah, so we probably operated, or we did operate with three main tools, I would say. Asana was our main project management tool. Google Docs, of course, for client collaboration. And then a tool that I absolutely love, which I don't think many people have heard of, is called Slab. And Slab is like a beautiful way of being able to create SOPs. So my methodology with Yatter was essentially, what are all of the steps that a client takes from not knowing who we are, seeing our ad, to then being, say, month 12 of a retained client? And what are all the steps that are involved there, the key sort of milestones? And then how can we create a checklist behind each of those milestones to ensure that every client gets the same experience and an exceptional experience? So that was my sort of philosophy on day one. That's what I created. And then that obviously changed and adapted over time as we brought more people in, we had more clients. And one of the key things that we did there was every single time we had a client issue crop up, so a client was unhappy about something, or they challenged something, or there was an objection, we flagged it as a team. We then had every Thursday we had what we called a strategy session, which was people could take these challenges and these objections into a round table, and we would then create a fix for that and implement that into our systems. So that would essentially, we would create a new project in Asana, or a template in Asana, add in the fix, and then for any new client, that fix would then be in the operating system for them. So we tried to, just explaining it there. So one of the things that I tried to get us to think about was, as a philosophy, we're not an agency, we're a SaaS product. That was the sort of philosophy that we brought. And whenever a client had an objection, that was a bug that we then had to fix. So like a specific example that I can share of that would be, we found that typically maybe 2 to 3 days after a client's campaign went live, if there hadn't been any results, the client would email us asking, why is there no results? For us, we knew that was pretty normal procedure. Things are just getting warmed up, there's no data, etc., etc. But for the clients, they're spending money. They've just spent a considerable amount of money on, our management fees, and then their money's gone out and they've got nothing to show for it after a couple of days. They go into panic mode. That's not a great way to start off a client relationship. You're on the back, as an agency, you're on the back foot straight away. So we then would just ensure that we sent a client an email after 1 to 2 days to say, it's very, very early days. We're not expecting any results just now, but you'll be glad to know we've got a couple of leads so far, or whatever the story was. So we got ahead of the objection before it became a problem. And every single time something like that came up, we would try and get that into Asana so that it didn't happen again.
I'm going to take that as a soundbite, Gavin, because that's very, very valuable for all the account managers listening. This is all about managing client expectation and also having that feedback loop within the business. So you are picking up on these things that happen all the time, addressing them, and then putting them into your process. So you're not reinventing the wheel and different people coming into the business are starting from scratch. So I absolutely love that. Fantastic. Anything else, any other tips that you can share that are equally as useful?
Yeah, I think we had a sort of understanding, or for me, the philosophy was that a, a client comes to us for results, and the bare minimum expectation that they have from us as an agency is results. So I tried to get the team to start thinking about, let's say a client spends 10 grand with us. That's 10 grand that they're spending on Yatter that they could be spending on something else that could also help them generate a return. So that could be email, that could be Bitcoin, it could be whatever. So let's not get bogged down in the creative elements of marketing. Let's try and make our language all about, are we actually generating the customer a return here? Because they're spending their money with us expecting a return. And that's the bare minimum. So if the results is the bare minimum that they expect, what are the other things that we can do to try and get that customer to actually enjoy the experience of working with us? So a couple of things were, communication being the key one. So let's ensure that we are always on the front foot with customers. We never ever want to be chased by a customer coming to us asking for something. So with that then created, that one point then created like our reporting framework, which was daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly. So daily, you had a dashboard you could log into any time and see the results that you want. That stops clients emailing us daily asking for results. Weekly, we had a check-in where we would essentially give them a quick overview of the results, what we've done, and any actions that we're going to take. That then tells the client what we're doing. We're active in their account. We're thinking about them. Monthly, traditional report and a call. And then quarterly, this was a key one that we did that went down really well, was we did quarterly business reviews. So this is where we took a step back from advertising and actually said, right, tell us about any changes that are happening in a business. Are you planning on doing anything for Black Friday, for Christmas? How can we support your business, not your marketing and advertising efforts, but your business to have a better quarter? So really trying to get deeper than that marketing and advertising. And I think for the account managers or owners that are listening, as we move further into a world of AI, where a lot of the media buying elements are being automated, your job is to try and become critical to your client's business. They want to be able to use you for more than just marketing and advertising and media buying. So you need to understand their business. You need to understand the economics of their business. You need to know how much money they're making, how much money your efforts are adding to how much money they're making, and by doing that, you become a much more crucial part of their team. And I think that's vital as AI does more and more.
Music to my ears that you're saying this. This is part and parcel of my program. Actually, is creating these moments, to these relevant moments that you're having a business-led conversation rather than a project-led conversation. So absolutely 100% love this. Anything else you want to share that you did that worked?
I think this wasn't something that we did necessarily with clients, but I touched on it there, the strategy sessions that we had, where because we were a relatively small team, we were able to do this as a team. But this could be broken down into departments or pods or whatever it may be, which was take any challenges that you have from a client, any objections, into a meeting where everybody's there and you can openly discuss them and create an action plan into how we're going to fix them. And if you do that weekly, that's 52 different fixes or objections that you're making into your process in a year. And that starts to really compound. So that is a crucial thing. And something else, just when I'm thinking about that, is we had another weekly meeting, which was every client, and we were able to do this in Asana, or every account manager had to score their client in a traffic light system. So green, amber, red, based on things like happiness, communication, results that they were getting. And we would then, as a team, again, look through all of the reds and some of the ambers to say, right, how do we get the amber to the green? How do we get the red to the amber? And sometimes, as an account manager, if you're working on an account in the ads and you're in it, it's very hard sometimes to take a step back and look at the overall picture. And so sometimes just having those regular meetings with other people in the team, you get ideas bouncing off. People go, oh, I had that issue with this client and this is how we fixed it. And you're able to then, as a business, keep track on all of the clients and make sure that they're all being pushed towards being, green, happy, getting results. So that was another, key metric and meeting that we had.
Perfect. Another great tip there. I call them client impact meetings, which are the internal meetings. But I love the way you're structuring this. So, as you say, the compounding effect of fixing these things makes for a very smooth process in the end. So let's go back to a letter of intent. You said that it took a year from the signing of the letter of intent to the deal. Is that typical?
I think it probably took it slightly longer for us, but that was due to the Bellstar who bought us had bought an agency prior to us, and so they were still working things out with them, and so I think that was just part and parcel of our deal. But there was no. I think it can sometimes be really quick. It can sometimes take a long time. In the grand scheme of things, how it felt in the moment was it felt pretty normal timing, I would say.
And at what point did you tell the team or certain members of the team?
So we had to wait until the deal was done. The reason being, it's not fair to go and necessarily tell the team that the business might be selling and then, the deal falls through or it takes longer than anticipated or whatever it might be. So we made the decision to wait until after the deal was done and just tell the team collectively on one, why we had done it, and two, what the next steps looked like. And the team took it really well, to be honest. I think they all knew sort of my personal circumstances. They all saw what we were doing as a business. In fact, our mission as a business was something that we repeated all the time, which was we wanted first to become the best paid media agency in Scotland, then the UK. And we feel like we had achieved the Scotland one based on our own metrics that we were measuring it by. And the next step was to become the UK. And we'd set that target to be sort of 3 to 5 years. And to achieve that, we probably did have to, do a big deal. Like either we acquire somebody or we were acquired. And based on, the circumstances that I mentioned, then we decided to go down the route of being acquired. And so we told the team afterwards. The team were really supportive. And it worked out great in the end, thankfully.
Any tips for other agency owners who might be at the point where they have to tell the team in terms of how you tell the team, what kind of context? Because everyone obviously thinks, what's in it for me, or how's this going to impact me? So how did that go for you? And could it got better? Could it have worked better for you?
I think if I was to change one thing, we had to do it remotely based on the time. There's a few things that are going around at that moment. You've got obviously the deal, you've got press releases, you've got having to tell the team weekends, holidays, all these types of things mean that you end up having to pick a day and a time to tell the team. And we had to tell the team on a day where we were remote. I think I was actually on holiday, to be honest, at the time. And
That's a pina colada
yeah, not quite that. I think it was a weekend away somewhere in Scotland, so not quite sitting on the beach. But we had to tell the team, and we did it remotely. I think probably telling them in person would have been maybe slightly better, but I don't think it could have gone any better than it did. It was Dave and I sort of led the conversation with them, and we were able to tell them why we were doing it, the benefits that were gonna come. We obviously knew that people would have potential objections or fears, like you mentioned, what's in it for them. And so beforehand, for me, it was a case of, well, I need to ensure, I need to get some assurances from Velstar on what life is going to look like at Velstar, so that I can tell the team with confidence that this is for the best for everybody. And so that was actually one of the key parts of, the due diligence. If you're an owner that's thinking about selling your business, you need to ensure that the due diligence has to work both ways. So they're doing a lot of due diligence on you, which they have to ensure it's a good deal. But you have to do due diligence on them as well to ensure that they're a right partner for you. Because chances are you're going to work for them for a period of time in some form of earnout. And all of the team that you have built are going to be working for them. And you want to obviously ensure that it's the best experience for everybody. And you also want to ensure it's the best experience for them too. So delivering a message on why it was a good move and why you've done the deal, it's important that you get it right for the person that's acquiring you. Because if you were to tell your team and they all left on day one, then that's not great for anybody. So it's a high stakes conversation, but I think just being honest, ensuring that you tell the team you've done your due diligence and you think that this is the right move for the business and for them will set you on the right path.
And then did you make yourself available for one-on-one conversations afterwards or anything? Like, how did you deal with because I'm presuming as soon as the team are told, they're probably on the text to each other, kind of, talking about what's happened. So any tips or advice for sort of how to manage that whole impact?
Yeah, I mean, like I say, our team were really close-knit, and everybody knew, I'd like to think everybody knew they could pick up the phone to me or jump on Slack for a huddle at any moment for anything. And that was the sort of culture that we had. There was no, glass walls dividing everybody. We were all together working on the projects. My management style is probably, I like to roll my sleeves up and get involved in projects. And so I sort of knew everything that was going on. Everybody knew that they could come to me if they needed anything. So after telling somebody, there wasn't anything specifically that we did. I think we just had a culture where people could reach out to me if they had any specific concerns. And the same goes for Dave. People would reach out to him as well. And that happened. And we had some conversations. And what was quite interesting was, hearing everybody's ambitions within a larger organization and being able to comfort them and saying, we will do our best for you. We will be your voice in the larger organization to try and make some of these things happen.
Interesting. What else came as a surprise during this whole process, Gavin, that you think actually would be very valuable for someone listening to know?
I think the thing that probably struck me was the sheer volume of work that's involved, as you go through the likes of due diligence, working with lawyers, and, every single stone in your business gets turned over and looked at and analysed. And it actually forces you to look at your business in a different way. You're looking at things that you'd never thought of before, down to, for example, wording in contracts. If you're an entrepreneur, chances are you probably hire somebody to spin up a quick contract for you, and you use that contract, and you never really analyze what's in every single point of said contracts. But when you're going through the likes of due diligence, some of these things sometimes crop up. So the sheer amount of work, and then I sort of alluded to earlier, it's the sheer amount of work, but also having to do all of that whilst operating the business and trying to keep it quiet from everybody was the really challenging part. So if I had any specific advice, I would say my accountant actually gave me this advice in advance, and I probably didn't listen to it well enough, which was try and prepare your data room early. So even if you're not at the stage of wanting to sell your business right now, having good data room hygiene is something I would recommend everybody do. So ensuring that, for example, all your incorporation documents are stored in a nice folder, all your customer contracts are stored in a folder, all of your employee contracts are stored in a folder and are kept up to date with any new employee, any new customer. All of these things are kept up to date, because the worst thing is actually the worst isn't having none of it. The worst is having some of it and going through and then realizing you've got a couple of contracts missing here, or something's missing there, and you're having to then scroll through your emails to try and find specific documents. So ensuring that you've got good hygiene in your data room, even if you're not thinking about selling right now, is something I would recommend, because it will save you an enormous amount of time when you do come to sell.
That is such a good point, because you were a team of 20 at that point, were you?
We were a team of 12.
12, sorry,
Yeah.
12. And at that point, all of your contracts, whether it was with the clients or with employees, had you employed the services of a legal firm to help you formulate those to a sort of good standard, or had you copy and pasted sort of contracts from different places?
No, we were. I mean, we. It's funny to say 3 years ago was before, or 4 years ago now was before ChatGPT. So we did have a legal firm draft client contracts, and we did have a HR firm draft our employee contracts. But I dare say now a lot of people are probably using AI, ChatGPT to spin up their contracts. And I think that feels okay in the moment, because you're able to get a contract spun up pretty quickly. But if you're thinking of selling one day, that's when those things could come back to bite you if you're not doing it properly. So thankfully we were fine. But I dare say now it might be more of a challenge.
Shout out to Hybrid Legal, who sometimes tune in. They've been on the show. What else would you like to kind of advise anyone that's going through this process, Gavin? Anything that you wish you'd have known at the time?
Well, Hybrid Legal were the ones that represented us, and they were great. So big shout out to Hybrid. There was, times where I was on holiday, and Mike at Hybrid was my voice of reason, and made the situation a lot easier. We actually spoke to a number of legal firms before we chose Hybrid, and I'm really glad I went with them, because some of the other ones weren't necessarily I don't think we would have got the best deal and the best experience with another legal firm. So that's actually it's quite a boring point, to be honest, but an important one is ensure you've got the right deal team around you. So for me, it was Cactus, Hybrid, and my accountants, Ashton McGill, were the sort of three people that I could lean on for all parts of the deal that just made life so much easier. So ensure that you've got the right people around you that have the best interests in heart, and if even better, if they've got experience in going through, mergers and acquisitions. So Cactus obviously have, being an M&A consultancy, or Blue Halo. Shout out to Blue Halo. Hybrid Legal have obviously done that for lots of people, and my accountant has done it for clients, and he's also bought and sold his own businesses. So I had a lot of experience, in my corner. I couldn't push that point enough, even though it might be slightly boring.
No, it's not boring at all. I think this is the fundamental things that people need to know. So we will put the links to Hybrid Legal, shout out to Ryan Lisk, Spencer Gallagher from Blue Halo, and Aston McCall, you said?
Yeah, it's Alistair McGill from Ashton McGill.
Completely wrong. Gavin, I'm conscious of your time, but I'm desperate to ask you one more question. The market has changed quite a lot with AI. What do you see as the future landscape for agencies?
Speaking from a paid media world, Mark Zuckerberg came out himself and said that their goal for Facebook is that any business owner can go on, click one button, and AI will do everything. It'll do all of the creative. It'll be able to test creative at scale. and it'll do all the campaign building. So that brings us back to the point that we spoke about earlier, which is, well, what do agencies actually add? And that's where agencies are really going to have to diversify away from we are just media buyers, marketers, advertisers, and more towards we are business consultants almost. We can come into your business, we understand the numbers, because this is actually one of the key points. So when a client is running ads, if the performance to the ads isn't where they want it to be, 9 times out of 10, it's not actually the advertising. It's because the business behind the advertising isn't set up properly in order to make it work. So you need somebody that can come in, and that might be things like customers aren't spending enough money with them, the product might not be right, average order value is not high enough, lifetime value is not high enough. So I think agencies are going to have to be able to go into businesses and look at them from, bird's eye view, to let's look at the entire business, as opposed to let's just help you with this one small part, which is advertising. I think the part after the advertising will become more important.
Love that. 100% agree with you. It's all about the business outcome and understanding that business language that clients use, because they're not interested in how you do it. They just want the result. Anything else you think that you can see that's changing, or any other trends?
One thing I would say is embrace. Well, one thing I would say is think about, and the thing that helped us massively was try and think about how can you productize your service more. So rather than having a service that changes with every client and every pitch and every demand that a client makes, how can you productize it and elevate your product and your service offering to that? We have created this service, we've created it this way because we know in our experience this is the best, this gives us the best possible outcome. And design your business around that, as opposed to we change, it's project based, it's based on the client, because that then allows the client to lead the relationship, whereas clients are paying you for your expertise and for you to lead the relationship. And I found that whenever we have let a client lead the relationship, it makes the client happy in the short term because they're getting their own way. But every single time they come back and say things like, we hired you to lead the relationship and tell us, and we feel like we're doing it. And so you have to be able to, in your experience, create a service that is repeatable, consistent, and is designed because you know that service gets the best possible outcome. And that will elevate you above the majority of your competition.
Have you come across any agency that you think that does this particularly well?
If I'm totally honest, I have always just stayed so much in my lane and very rarely have looked outside to competition. But there is an agency, I believe, Soar With Us. I've seen them on a couple of podcasts recently, and they seem to be doing things pretty well with mainly like D2C e-com brands. So I couldn't speak for them specifically because I don't know too much about them, but I have heard good things about them.
Amazing. Well, I'll have a look at those as well. Any final thoughts or advice for anyone listening that's either about to go through this process, is contemplating this process? Any kind of words of wisdom?
Yeah, I would say don't get caught up too much in trying to sell the business. Let the business sell itself. Instead, focus on finding a partner that can take your business to the next level and that will work for everybody. So things like culture fit. I mean, culture fit's the main one. You're, like I mentioned earlier, you're doing your due diligence as much as they're doing their due diligence on you. So ensure that you find somebody that is the right partner and the right business to take your business forward.
Great. And sorry, I've gone backwards. to that point, what kind of questions should you be asking to verify whether it's the right culture fit, or do you just know?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. I think you get the feeling. There's definitely the gut feeling, and that's probably 80% of it, and the other 20% is going to be things, more practical things that you know your team are probably asking. So things like their salaries, their benefits, holidays, and things that they're used to in their business. So, for example, our team in our business, we had a very, I guess, flexible approach when it came to things like holidays, and if you had an appointment at home, it's fine. Like, we have life outside of work. So we had that sort of culture. As long as the job gets done, then everybody's happy. And so, if that's your type of culture, then you have to ensure that the person that's acquiring you has a similar culture, because otherwise it's going to be a big, the team are used to one thing. If it then changes into something that's negative, they're not going to be happy about it. So there's the gut feel, and then there's the more practical things that the team, and you'll know your team are you know the questions that your team will be asking.
Yeah, lovely. Listen, thank you so much, Gavin. If anyone's listening to this and want to get in touch with you, who do you want to hear from, and what's the best way of reaching you?
Yeah, the best way reaching me is Mr. Gavin Bell, and you can find my websites, mrgavinbell.com, or any of the social media channels is Mr. Gavin Bell. I'm probably mostly active on LinkedIn and Instagram. And I'm open to hearing from anybody. If anybody's got any questions from this episode that's got further, maybe it's sparked an idea, or they've got further questions about the sales process or building the agency, building a business, then I'm more than happy to hear from anyone.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, and congratulations. I think this is phenomenal, particularly for your age as well, because you're still quite a young chap. You've got the rest of your life ahead of you. So I think it's, congratulations. All right,
Thanks,
Gavin, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Fab.